Welcome to the Unraveling Shaltazar podcast. Welcome to another episode of Unraveling Shaltazar podcast. Hello, Jeffrey. How are you today?
Good, Mark. And how are you?
I'm good. We were just having a conversation. I'm good. I'm tired, but I'm good. The energy that seems to be swirling about these days is rather heavy and thick. I was explaining to you how I felt like I've been draped in a wet blanket for the past 4 or 5 days. So,
Yeah, and interestingly enough, you were also mentioning that your battery in your smartphone seemed to be draining quicker, and so it's kind of fascinating how the universe mirrors us and reflects what's happening if you're willing to sort of look at the signs. But tiredness is certainly something that I have been feeling, and it's as he holds back a yawn.
Right.
It's kind of interesting, and I highly encourage listeners to talk to other people and share with what's going on in your life. For me, talking to other people and hearing what they're going through helps me understand what I'm going through, and you will start to notice some patterns. And so as you shared what's going on in your life and a few of my clients, it kind of makes more sense to me, and I'm able to be kinder and gentler to myself when I'm going through this period that sometimes feels like the tunnel of darkness.
Right. Yeah. You had mentioned that old adage, misery loves company. I think sometimes it's not necessarily misery, but it's nice to have some sort of validation or some sort of affirmation that you're not the only one that's feeling the way you're feeling, and that it isn't necessarily because of you. It's because of what's going on around you and in the universe in general. And we're just all experiencing it, perhaps in a little bit different ways, but we're all kind of feeling the same things. So,
Well, and even that saying, "misery likes company," really, I mean, if you sort of dissect it and look deeper into it, I think the reason misery likes company is because it is that validation. When someone else is going through that misery, it means I'm not going through it alone. It means that I'm not the only one suffering, and immediately you get a little bit of reprieve, you get a little bit of lighter feeling, you get a little bit more liberated because you know it's just not you. And I think that's important. That's why Shaltazar continues to encourage us to find our circle, find our tribe, find like-minded people, because we're going through some pretty intense times, and we definitely need that company to help us get through it.
right. Yeah. There's a tribe. You mentioned a tribe. Just that ability to collaborate. I know that we often collaborate on Insight Timer in a group, and just kind of being able to check in with other people, especially with this quasi isolation still going on, is a nice thing to be able to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think there's some purpose in this whole pandemic thing, where we take some time to go inward, and then we realize how important that connection is. One of the things that's come up for me lately is that it's okay to change your tribe. I know some of the people I know, they talk about their friends and relatives that get them and their friends and relatives that don't. And I'm saying, well, why are you still hanging around with the friends that don't get you, that you can't be yourself with? And it's like there seems to be this perception that we're supposed to have friends for life, and that you're supposed to be close with family. And I'm not a big proponent of that. I think you should be close to those that support you, close to those that help you on your journey. And if there are people that drag you down and aren't supporting you, whether they're family or friends, you may want to let them go. I'm a big proponent of that saying that people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And sometimes even if it's your family and you think you're stuck with them for a lifetime, they just may be the season people, and you kind of have to shift that relationship with them a little bit.
Sure. Right. Yeah, that's. I've always. I've had that same conversation with my wife, who clings very tightly to her friendships, and I've said, well, sometimes a friendship, it's there for a purpose. It comes in and serves its purpose, and once its purpose has been served, perhaps the friendship is no longer necessary. It doesn't mean that you don't like the person anymore, or you just don't need to connect with them in the same way anymore. So
Absolutely, yeah, good.
So, and that kind of transitions nice or segues nicely into the message I wanted to talk about today, which is a newer one called "Your Heart Holds the Key," recorded just a couple months ago in December of 2020, and this whole idea that we've kind of been talking about this lower, slower, heavier energy. This message sort of speaks to that and talks about how we as the humans experiencing that lower and slower energy can try to, I guess, understand it, make friends with it, use it to our advantage, which in the conversation we were just having before the podcast, we decided was a pretty tough thing to do. So I'm interested in talking about that.
And it's interesting you chose this message because I've been going through a period of a little bit lower, slower myself. I think that's for purpose. And it's like, why did you choose this one today? I'm not going to be able to speak as well to it. But I truly believe that was for purpose. And one of the main teaching is that it may be time for us to change the power arrangement within ourselves. And I think the line is that we shift from the mind being the master to the mind becoming the servant. And then Shaltazar says, and we ask, well, what is to be the master? And they're saying the heart. And in order for the heart, the feelings to become the master, they're saying we need to be able to understand, cope with, and process those lower and slower emotions in a more appropriate way. And as I was listening to it this morning, it's sort of like, well, that's easy for you to say, Shaltazar, but how do we process these lower and slower feelings that are so uncomfortable? And a couple of insights surfaced. One is that not all lower and slower emotions are created equal. Some of them are a little bit deeper. The despondency, the depression, the deep guilt or shame. Those are going to be a little bit more challenging to transmute. They do say that the object of the game is to transmute them into love. But when it's so deep, it's going to be difficult to do. And so, one thing they've taught me is that these things come in layers, and you may not be able to move from that depression to joy, instantaneously. But if you can move from that depression to a little bit less hopelessness and a little bit more hopefulness, then I think you're heading in the right direction. So one of the things that's important to realize is that it's going to be a little bit challenging to get out of those lower and slower emotions, but don't be afraid of it. I think they're asking us to go through a new regime of training, because if the heart is to be the master, we are going to have to cope with the ups and downs, with the highs and the lows, and to a certain degree, we're all a little bit bipolar, and we have to understand that those highs are going to come and those lows are going to come. So to become more understanding of that. So I think that's an important takeaway, is to realize that as we allow the heart to become the master, the ride's going to be a little bit bumpy as we adapt to handling those lower and slower emotions, if that makes any sense to you.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think of when you say a layered approach to kind of climbing out of it, I guess. You've mentioned before a ladder. Rather than trying to go from the ground to the top of the ladder in one step, you may have to take an interim path of baby steps to try to get yourself there. I know Abraham Hicks. They always say, "Reach for a better feeling thought." So, whatever that thought is that feels like it's holding you down or oppressing you, maybe it's something simple like look outside and enjoy the sunshine, or look at a flower, or watch a TV. Do something that makes it a little bit better. Than one step at a time, I guess.
Well, yeah, and it's really, really important to not have too high an expectation. I remember a client a number of years ago who was sexually abused by an uncle, and she went to her mother, and her mother ignored the situation and refused to accept that. And there was a feeling of great dislike and possibly even hatred for this person towards their mother. And as we were coaching, she at one point got to where she didn't hate her mother nearly as much, but felt somewhat neutral. And I said, great, neutrality might be the best that you can ever achieve with your mother. You because of what happened in your personal history, there's no way that you could take that hatred and necessarily move to love. And if you can move to neutrality, if you can be neutral about your mother and not despise her so much, then maybe that's as good as it's going to get. So I think that's an example of what you're talking about. Sometimes you have to climb that ladder, and you got to be happy with the rung that you got to, and not have expectations that you're going to be able to totally turn it around.
Sure. Yeah. Take a step in the right direction and see where that leads you, I suppose. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it's going to be really important. Sorry to interrupt. I think it's going to be important for us to realize that if we are going to make our heart of hearts the master, that we are going to have to cope with those times we are feeling what I like to call in the tunnel of darkness. And you and I were talking about this before we started recording, that in the tunnel of darkness, it becomes very, very difficult to understand the feelings. Shaltazar says that feelings are truth, and to accept, to acknowledge the feelings, accept them as if they're your best friend, and try to let them speak to you. Well, when you are in that tunnel of darkness, when you are in the midst of that lower and slower feeling, I don't think it's realistic to expect that you're going to surface the truth at that time. And I think I was pointing out to you what the Hermetic philosophy based on Hermes Trismegistus in the Kabbalion says, and that's that the Hermetic masters would try to move above the swing of the pendulum. So I think sometimes the best you can do is move to the observer. Watch, get a part of you watching on as you're going through the difficult emotions, and just hold that neutral, objective observer status as you watch on the actor that you go by your name is going through this difficult time. And when that starts to pass, the fact that the observer has sort of been recording it, it's sort of like your VCR or your camcorder recording what you went through. As you exit the tunnel of darkness, as you start to get out of those deeper, darker feelings, you may be able to get the wisdom and get the truth from it, but you won't when you're going through it. I don't know if that resonates with you at all.
Yeah, it does. I was trying to remember. You said the idea that when you're going through those things, that, when we let our mind kind of run the show, I suppose, we look for we tend to look for the cause, and we try to figure it out. Why is this happening, or even if we are aware enough to realize that there's a lesson involved in what's happening to us, we start to dig down. Okay, what is this lesson? I gotta learn this lesson. And you'd said look for the lesson, not the cause, and don't try so hard. And so those things all seem kind of a bit paradoxical, but that seems to be what Shaltazar is suggesting is a path through this sort of experience, I guess.
Right, and I think the biggest challenge we have when we're looking for the cause, or even when we're looking for the lesson, when we're in the midst of the deeper, darker, lower and slower, unpleasant, uncomfortable feelings, you're not going to be able to get there. You're not going to be able to get there because, Shaltazar at one point used the analogy, it's like you've lost your cell service or your Wi-Fi service and you're cut off. So you're kind of alone. The universe, your intuition is not going to be able to help you because you're in this snit, in this tunnel of darkness. And so I think in this message, your heart holds the key. And by the way, thank you for the title. You did the title on that one, and I love it. They are saying that love is the elixir, that you have to be okay loving yourself. It would be like a loving parent when you're going through a really, really difficult time. And I know most of us would have really liked loving parents. I don't think that many of the population got to have the parents that they wanted to, but I think that's for purpose. But if you can imagine the most loving, kind, understanding parent holding you in their arms, cradling you and saying, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay. That's what I think they're encouraging us to move to. And then figuring out the lesson, letting go of the cause, surfacing all of the wisdom will come when you're calmed down, when you feel that, I don't have to figure this out to get out of this. And so I think that's what Shaltazar is saying is bring in that feeling of love, that it's okay to feel miserable, depressed, hopeless. And that is so difficult because it's so contrary to what we have been trained to do. When it comes to anger, what's the term they use? Anger management, right? We have to manage anger. And so anything that's unpleasant, there's a certain stigma that we're not supposed to feel it. It's bad. It's not where we're supposed to be. And we need to realize that the full spectrum of emotions is what we're here to experience. And if you can be in those lower and slower emotions and still feel that loving parental figure, which I believe is God, cradling you in your arms, you will get through it, and then the lessons will surface.
Yeah. It's you sometimes you got to climb out of the swimming pool to get the lay of the land, right? So you need a little bit of perspective. You need to step back a little bit, decompress a little bit before it starts to make sense.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you've had a near drowning experience, you're not going to figure out what went wrong while you're trying to, get above the water.
Right.
But after you get out of the lake or the ocean or whatever, you can reflect back when you're in a more safer, calmer place. And I think that's what Shaltazar is saying is just love yourself into being okay with the misery, with the suffering, and then the lessons will surface. And so it's important because it's so easy to take Shaltazar very literally, and people must understand that as I channel it, I'm just doing the best I can to translate and transcribe their wisdom. So it's easy if you're listening to my voice to take what I'm saying literally, but there's greater depth to it. And so I don't think they're saying that you will figure it out in the midst of your suffering, of your darkness, of your uncomfortable feelings. What they are saying is that if you can love yourself into at least a little bit of quietude, a little bit of peace, a little bit of reassurance, that's really, really important. And that message ends with that insight that love can not only give you what you want, but love can take away that which you don't want. So be okay. Let go of the judgment. Let go of making those lower and slower feelings wrong. And you will definitely get the wisdom when you're on the shore after you've survived that near drowning experience.
Sure. Great. That's great. That's great insight. I enjoyed that explanation a lot. It hits home. Well, it hits home for me. As we know, we were talking about that, and it makes a lot of sense. And this that idea of living more from the heart, more from the heart and less from the mind is a challenge, but it feels like it's the right thing to do to transmute this energy, I guess.
Right. And I've been doing this for a number of years, 15 to 18 years, and lately I got stuck in that darkness. So wanted to go back to old habits and say, you've been doing this long enough, you should be able to figure this out. But of course I couldn't, and that's part of my learning. There are layers in this, and so this has been a nice, gentle reminder for me as well, to be gentle with myself when I'm going through my trip through the tunnel of darkness.
Great. Same here. Well, we're out of time. Thanks, Jeffrey. Appreciate your wise counsel once again, and look forward to what we come up with to talk about next week.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being such an amazing host, picking wonderful lessons, and for being my buddy and partner in this learning. And so I thank you for that, and love and light to everyone.
If you have any questions about the Master Teachings of Shaltazar, we invite you to submit them to Jeffrey at jeffreyeisen.com, and we will make your question the topic of a future episode.